Welcome to the debut episode of the 90th Percentile Outcomes podcast. I'm Owen Hurd. I'm joined by my co-host, Ross Jensen. He is the co-founder of Scout the Stat Line and owner of ProspectsLive. Ross, I'm excited to have you, and we're excited to get started. If you wanted to start us off, just tell us a little bit about the work we're doing with ProspectsLive and STS. We'd love to hear about that.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I should go back and give a little history on how STS got started, because I think that's the best way to kind of describe where we're going now. So this is going back to about 2019. I started writing just kind of on the side for the Dynasty Guru, and I met Jordan Rosenblum there. And he just had been writing some really interesting articles about aging curves and minors to major league translations, which was just very fitting with my way of evaluating prospects at that time, just kind of innately. That's what I did. So I reached out to him, and we just kind of struck up a conversation, and we decided we should really be applying these principles that he was exploring in these articles. So that's what we did, and that was like where we came up with the first version of the Scout Stat Line peak projections model. We just kind of thought, okay, we need to just apply this to every player, let people see a list of all their projected statistical outputs, and then, we thought to make it easy for people to read and use, like there needed to be a rank involved and so on and so forth. That's kind of how the model got its start. And back then, we were just kind of writing about the results. So we'd run the model, write about the results, run the model again, maybe a month later, write about the results. And then at some point, we kind of decided we just need to have a place to put this stuff. Rather than us writing about it, people should be able to get their own insights from it. So eventually, I think this was about 2021, we launched our website, Scout the Stat Line. Went through some iterations, been through a bunch of changes since then. Originally, we were just doing it for free, just giving it away. And I tried to keep it that way as long as we possibly could. But at some point, it's we wanted to be able to build out this community and build out these other things, and it just takes resources to get there. So we changed it to a subscription model, and we've just refined it so that we could update more and more frequently. We were doing weekly at that time, and then we started doing daily. So the data is always fresh. You always have the newest information. The model has advanced so much, it's refined, it's gotten better. We've added in advanced statistics. And it's just kind of taken on a life of its own, and we've built a pretty good community, pretty good following. And then, I, in about around 2020, I think, Smada, the president of ProspectsLive, he had put something on X, then Twitter, about moving to Boise, which is where I live. And I didn't think, I had a little back and forth exchange with him about it because I was here, and I was just kind of giving him the lowdown on what it was like. And I didn't think much of it for a couple of years. A couple of years passed by, and Jordan started working with ProspectsLive, and it just kind of dawned on me, wait a second, I think he lives here in town. I should reach out and we should talk. So I did, and we kind of became friends over time. So this stuff was all kind of happening in tandem, and we were just kind of we just would talk about what it's like running baseball sites. It's very random that we just happen to be in the same area. And then, this opportunity came to join ProspectsLive from a leadership perspective. So I took it. What I want to do ultimately moving forward, this is kind of a long explanation to really kind of get to the heart of your question of where are we going. I want to try to consolidate a lot of this niche industry so that we have one great spot where everybody can go to. And it's not so dispersed. The way things are going now is great for individuals. Anyone can kind of start their own deal, but for consumers, it's less than ideal, in my opinion, because now you've got to decide whether, it's Bob that you should be paying $5 a month or $10 a month to, or whether it's, Chris, or whether whoever it is, Yeah. And I just want to have I want to build a community where it's this gives you everything. And also bring together a lot of those people as well that are involved content creators doing great work out there. There's so many people out there that are hustling every day, like you, Owen, as an example.
I appreciate that. I do my best.
But just like people are doing great work, and I just want to kind of bring that community together and give consumers something that's, a no-brainer. Like, you'd be silly not to pay $5 or $10 a month in order to get all this great content. Yeah. That's going to help you win your dynasty leagues. That's going to help you win in the card market, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Just to add on to the STS, one thing I really like is I feel like with the peak projections alone, you are getting the cost of your subscription, and then you pair that with being able to get just these formulated data, like the bag score and the pitcher independent game score. I'm sorry if I'm mistaking those, but also get that hobby tool, find those overvalued, undervalued card prospects, and then now with the articles too, I know you've mentioned just also kind of merging the two, so then potentially getting all of that with the written analysis of ProspectsLive just from a draft, college prep perspective. I think, getting all of that too. And that also gets me into just for one of my goals with this podcast, as you mentioned, just having kind of everything in one place. I feel like a lot of podcasts, they do well from either a fantasy lens or a pro lens. I want to really kind of bridge together both of those and look at, not only what level prospects are we looking at for fantasy, but from a professional standpoint as well, because there are things that matter from a pro standpoint, like defense, for example, and then some fantasy leagues, strikeouts may not matter as heavily as others. For example, just to name one, there's a few others there, but really, I think, we also have different standards when we look at prospects from a fantasy perspective, where we want everyday players on our fantasy teams, right? If you can get, a 4 or 5 day a week outfielder from, a lowly ranked prospect at the time coming up, I think you'd consider that a developmental success. So I think really to kind of look at, both sides of that too is really one thing I really want to touch on. And not only can we help you from a fantasy perspective, but also, give you those tidbits on, the prospects from a pro lens as well.
Yeah. How do those two intersect? And I mean, I think the fantasy world in general is getting more advanced all the time too. And at some point you might not really be able to tell the difference. If we can ever find a good way to integrate defense into fantasy, I'm sure we will. So that's my view on it. I think I've said this a lot on X, and I guess I just want to reinforce this idea that right now I feel like we've got a niche industry that's ripe for the picking. As in, you could have a large player come in like an ESPN, and they could totally own this area if they actually wanted to invest in it. So far, they don't seem like they've had the appetite to really go deeply into it. You've seen a lot of these big publications that kind of dabble in it, but they don't want to fully go in. And I think that's what I'm hoping to do by bringing people together, is like create some resiliency so that we aren't ripe for the picking when that time comes. Eventually they're going to see the value in it, the value that like somebody like me sees in it. So I hope we can kind of build that strength before that happens, so that we're giving a product that's so good and nobody in the market can really match it. That's what I hope to do.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you there. And I think just really like what you mentioned, just also kind of, going all in on kind of the fantasy side as well, and just kind of bridging that with the pro stuff we're doing too. And, I'm really excited to be a part of both ProspectsLive and Scout Statline now, and just where we're going to be going. So to get into it, I know we both did our top 100 updates recently. I try and personally do these monthly. I think you do too also. I think I see those come around every month or so for you, but we want to get into some risers, some fallers, and also some guys that just missed for you that you think could be looking in on your next update. So if you want to start us off with your risers.
Yeah, sure. I've got a lot of guys that are moving up fast, and yes, you're right. Like I do this year, I've committed to, I'm going to send out a top 100 every month, hopefully about the beginning of every month. So I've got another one coming up in about a week and a half. So some of this is still kind of evolving, but one guy that I know that's going to be moving up right off the bat is Connor Griffin. He was already pretty high in my last update. I think I had him, I'm kind of guessing, I don't have it in front of me, but I think I had him 13, and he's going to be easily in the top 10, maybe top 5. So he's my first guy. Connor Griffin, just great bat to ball skills, incredible natural power and speed. He's got just about everything that you want. I've kind of comped him to Bobby Witt on the internet, and I think that that's pretty suitable. The one area of weakness or concern, in my opinion, is he doesn't take a lot of walks, which I always have a concern that this could mean more advanced pitching can take advantage of that and induce weaker contact, but we haven't seen that so far. So right now I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that, he's going to have a Bobby Witt type of trajectory.
Yeah, no, I love the Witt comp, and I think just one thing we're not really talking about Griffin enough about is he's actually gotten better since being promoted to high A as a 19-year-old. Looking at him in single A, 50 games, 36 RBIs, 26 steals, very good numbers. But the interesting part for me is you mentioned the walk rate. He's actually improved that 2.3%. It's up to 8.5 now in high A. The strikeout rate is down in half. Over half to 10.6, 390, 447, 659. Already 2 home runs, 9 RBIs, and 7 stolen bases. Small sample size, but I think when you see that kind of trajectory, it almost kind of makes you I kind of see a bit of just, can this be a potentially Sebastian Walcott type aggressive assignment where we see maybe a cup of coffee and Double-A to end the year, and I don't really think that's out of the question for Griffin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm presuming that there's going to be a little bit of regression in his high A performance because it's been so unreal. But if those gains that you just mentioned with the walk and the strikeout rates are sustained, I mean, forget about it. He's number one prospect.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's a short list right now for me in terms of my next potential 1-1. It's Walcott, who I think I give the slighter edge to now. I think just really the offensive outlook, and you pair that with Double-A as a 19-year-old, he could realistically be in the big leagues around the All-Star break next year. I think just it's a really a ridiculous trajectory, and really the two big areas of his game, the contact and the Ks, have improved. I think LDV is up there as well, and then it's probably Connor Griffin, and then probably Luis Pena, Kevin McGonigal, just a little bit back, not at the same level of those first three for me, but in that conversation. So definitely going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season shapes out, and who's number one, or for the consensus at least, going into next season.
Yep, and those are the same guys that I'm talking about. I'm probably a little higher on Pena and McGonigal, but that tends to be my style. I can be a little more forgiving on the power side of things generally, because especially if I think there's a guy that can develop that through time.
Yeah.
So my next guy on here is Chase Burns, and for pretty obvious reasons, elite pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds. I think he's probably the number one pitching prospect at this point. That might be debatable, but I think that's where I'm seeing it. So I'm probably going to slide him above somebody like Painter right now. He's looking really sharp.
Yeah, no, I had Burns at 6, Painter at 10, and then Bubba, I believe, I want to say 14. So that was my kind of top three. So I think he's making it less and less debatable with each start, and I think really just to see a prospect 280 grade pitches is really absurd for a prospect, and I don't really think people want to talk about it, but I think this kind of reminds me of, almost like kind of Skeens type dominance in the minor leagues. Not really. I don't think, he's going to come up and obviously have the, first 35 to 40 career big league starts that Skeens has had. But I think there's few prospects, in my opinion, that have that true ace level upside. And I think Burns is right at the top of there. Just the stuff is absurd. I think I've had less and less concern as time has gone on with the potential reliever risk there. And I think really just, especially from a fantasy perspective too, with the strikeout upside that he has, I really think he is firmly atop that number one pitching prospect conversation right now.
Fully agree. Okay, my third guy I've got on here is Theo Gillen with the Rays. I think I was mistaken about him starting the year. I was a Braylon Payne guy. I had Payne high coming into the season, and I kind of thought Payne was the guy that was going to take off. I had talked with other people that, they were kind of they like both Payne and Gillen, and maybe like even slightly preferred Gillen. And I was very much on the Payne side, and like I'm looking at it now, and it just looks like I was mistaken. Gillen has just been rising quite a bit over the last 60 days, really. But I think this month he's really kind of established himself like he's in the top sort of 30 at least conversation, in my opinion. So yeah, just a really good prospect, rising on STS leaderboards as well. So he's just a guy you want to know.
Yeah, no, I'm a little lower on Gillen. I don't recall exactly, but I think he was, I want to say upper 70s for me right now. Definitely could see that rise a little bit. I kind of tend to accept being more of a kind of late adopter when it comes to guys in the lower levels of the minors. I tend to just be a bit more skeptical until we just see how those guys look as they move up a little bit. But really, I think you're looking at a plus hit tool and average power potential, really solid approach, good speed. I think you both from both a pro and fantasy perspective, you're looking at a guy who can contribute across 4, maybe even 5 categories.
Yep. Totally agree. Next gentleman on here is Michael Arroyo with the Mariners, repping the hat. I think I had him too low in my last rankings, and I was critiqued a little bit for that by some of the commentators, and I think that's fair. The STS model has been a real big fan of him for quite a while. They have him higher than I've got him personally, or I had him, but I just think this month he's really, I don't know, he's been making the case. So a lot of power in there, a lot of on-base potential. I'm a little leery of the strikeouts. That's one area that I kind of question. But, I mean, he's so good at getting on base. Like, he's seen a lot of pitches clearly. He's just a good, solid prospect.
Yeah,
it will be interesting to see how that translates higher levels. That's one area that I'm going to watch closely.
Yeah, no, I think I like the power, especially from a second baseman, and you look at just how thin that position can be, and definitely a guy who can give you 20 to 25 home run power at that position. I try not to put a premium on positions, but when you can get that kind of pop from a second baseman, I'm definitely a bit more interested in the potential trajectory. Whereas if you're looking at a guy who's maybe like a 50 hit, 50 power or something like that, I think, Arroyo is probably close to plus power for me. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the strikeouts are manageable. 21.5 K rate, 13.1 base and ball rate. I would like to see how that plays up in the higher levels, as you mentioned, but he's still 20 in high A. So I think a pretty respectable clip for that. And then the one thing, I guess, to nitpick a little bit is the contact rate at 75.1%. Not terrible, but I think the hit tool is given a bit more credit than it should. I think it maybe lags a little bit behind the power. Not bad by any means, but I think it's more of a closer to 50 hit than in level with the power.
So I have an interesting comparison, not to derail this too much, but when Tamar Johnson was coming into the league, he was coming in with a reputation of having an elite hit tool. It turns out he was more on base and power. I feel like him and Arroyo share some similarities, but Arroyo is doing it at a higher level than Tamar Johnson, in my opinion. Not at a higher level, actually, but like playing at a higher level. So to me, he kind of seems like the good case Tamar Johnson that we wanted to be seeing from him is now what we're seeing from Michael Arroyo.
Yeah, no, I can get behind that for sure. And Tamar Johnson is a guy I'm lower on. He's not really a top 100 prospect for me. I think now, from when he was drafted, the kind of question of, is this an everyday second baseman at the big league level, has, that concern has gotten a bit higher than it has when he was drafted. And I do think when you look at really, especially in a level of, the approach and the on-base skills, and you compare that to that of Tamar, who was said to have an elite hit tool coming out of the draft, I do think that's a pretty fair comp. And I think really what we're seeing from Arroyo now is what a lot of people thought we would get from Tamar Johnson.
Yeah, definitely. So I just released my second base ranks. Non-debuted, I had him number 1 for second base. That's maybe not saying too much because the position is relatively weak, but I kind of see him being in that like same area as Theo Gillen that I was mentioning, like top 30 sort of area.
Yeah, I mean, I would still favor Travis Bazzana at 1. I think even with the injury, I think really just I've heard better things about kind of the data under the hood than the slash line. Good contact rates. I think if I'm remembering correctly, he had the second best EVs in the draft class. From the college side, that is, doesn't chase much. Good contact rates. I think really, the injury didn't move him down too much for me. He's still somebody who's in that mid to late 20s range. So I still think that's somebody I favor slightly over Arroyo, especially when you factor in the speed and defense. But I think really, with Arroyo's bat, it's not. I don't think the gap is all that much. Arroyo is low 40s for me right now, and I think especially if we see if he can carry this over into the upper minors, this is somebody I can definitely see in that top 30 range, as you mentioned.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation. Just the comparison of those two players. I mean, Arroyo you could get for, I don't know, pennies on the dollar in comparison to Bazzana, right? Like the value of Bazzana is so much higher. But from my perspective, I mean, I'm starting to fade Bazzana in general, just because now we've got a sizable sample and we're just still not seeing the results. It reminds me a bit of Dylan Cruz, and there's still constant talk about, well, the data is good. It's like, okay, well, why is the performance not there then? Like at some point you have to accept that, like, it's just not going to happen, in my opinion, anyway. So Bazzana, I'm starting to get a little leery of. If I was holding, like, if I had to pick between those two guys, I'd probably try to trade for Arroyo plus. If I had Bazzana, I'd probably do that deal. If we're talking dynasty or fantasy.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting to bring it up just from a fantasy value perspective too, because I think really Arroyo, I think realistically he can be had as a potential. Maybe this is a bit too low, but back end top 100. Back end top 75 prospect, where I don't think I think Bazzana even, I think this is someone who still in that kind of top 25 overall conversation. Like hypothetically, if you're trading for a superstar hitter or superstar pitcher to make a push in your lineup, I don't think that Michael Arroyo is going to be the same level of prospect headliner as Travis Bazzana.
Right. Yep. Totally agree. And I guess that's what I'm thinking about arbitraging is perceived value versus what I think the real value is. And you were talking about, I mean, I highlighted the strikeout rate from Arroyo being a concern at, what did you say, 21.5%?
Yeah. So, yeah, I
and
mean, average for at that age.
And Bazzana is at 26.2. So, I mean, it's hard for me to see, like, well, what is Bazzana doing that's better? Granted, he's at a higher level, so there's that. But now, about a half a season worth of plate appearances. I don't know. He's a 245 hitter. Like it's just not there quite yet. And we could, I could be totally wrong. Maybe this time next year it's a shut case, and Bazzana is clearly the better prospect. But right now, I'm just not quite seeing it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's, I think that kind of Arroyo has put it into that more kind of arguable. I think going into the year, it would have been a much different conversation if you're looking at Arroyo versus Bazzana. But I think that really speaks more to just, how good Arroyo has been. I think this is, really, if you're looking at really just, that combo of like hit power from a second baseman, I think the approach will be okay. So I think really the foundation is there for sure. And I think it's interesting to look at it just from a dynasty perspective where, I don't think, I think there's a big difference in terms of, what you're looking at from a potential return if you dangle, a Michael Arroyo versus Travis Bazzana in a package, especially with those deadlines coming up. I think that the name value in fantasy definitely applies a lot more than it would for me at a pro level.
Yep.
And, we can't have everybody rise. So, I know we've got a few fallers. So if you wanted to get into a few who are falling down or headed in the wrong direction for you.
Okay. Fallers. Okay. So I mentioned before Braylon Payne. We probably don't need to talk too much about that. He started out hot and he has just hit the wall. But it's just been a struggle now going on for almost 2 months. you got to ding him for it. So as much as I like him, and I made some trades for him early on, thinking like this was the guy, and it looks like I was mistaken on that. You live and you learn. So he's one of them. I got James Triantos. He looks like he might be able to hit for average. I don't think he's going to give you much else. And even the average this year is not there. So that's somebody I'm growing a little leery of. And then Andrew Salas. He's another one of those guys. Started out hot. I'm not off of him. I think he's still incredibly young, playing at single A, barely 17. So, I think he can turn it around, but I think he's hitting like 220 last I looked. So it's not good. And he started out really strong. So, and very limited power. Now that kind of brings us into the Ethan Salas conversation a little bit. Is there something more to it? Jose Salas, but.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think Triantos is really an interesting one because if you look at really just some of his StatCast data from AAA this year, it's almost like he's kind of sacrificed some of the contact for power. If you look at the EVs last year, 85.9 average, 104.7 max, 2-degree launch angle, 28.2 hard hit. That's up to 86.6 average, 109.2 max, 7.8-degree launch angle, 37.7 hard hit. Still, like that's still probably a 40, 45 at best power. And then looking at the contact too, that's another thing is like we're looking at a 92.1 zone contact last year. That's down to 88.5. The O contact is also down just over 4.5%. Chase rate is up 4% as well. And the swing strike rate is also up 3.2%. So I think a lot of really what kept Triantos on was really I was looking at a guy who could, even if you're looking at a 10 to 12 home run hitter at best in the MLB level, you're getting a plus hit tool and plus speed. And then we also haven't seen the stolen bases at the level that they were last year too. We saw 47 last year. I was really excited about just kind of the hit speed. And, also, I'll kind of put this out there as well as, my kind of philosophy towards kind of fading those more kind of slap ball hitters in the upper minors who don't really project for, even double digit power. I've kind of soured on a lot of those type of profiles. For me, it's just not for me. I think really I think a best case outcome for these guys, you're looking at maybe like a Steven Kwan type. And I think, outside of that, the floor is maybe a bench player. And I think that's a range of outcomes that for me personally, I'm a little hesitant to put in my kind of top 100. There's obviously exceptions to this when you have top of the scale hit tools coming up, like Jacob Wilson is a good example of this where, and he's blown away really what we were thinking power wise. But if you have guys for the most part who are going to hit, maybe 10 to 15 home runs, like poor EVs, poor launch angles, poor hard hit rate, that hit tool needs to be really, really, truly elite. And maybe you need another strong tool in there, whether it be approach, speed, defense, something else like that for me, really to have him as a top 100 prospect. So I've gotten a lot of questions about why, Justin Crawford is another one I've moved out of my top 100 for reasons like that. But, I think it's also just kind of the difference in just how I've started to view just some of these kind of low power, above average hit tool and really not much else profiles.
Yeah, Justin Crawford's an interesting one to touch on. I'm still fairly high on him, and one of the big reasons for that is just like I compare him to Carl Crawford a lot. I think he's going to develop power similarly like Carl Crawford did. In fact, if you compare them in the minor leagues, it looks to me like Justin is more advanced than Carl was at the same time. Even though Carl, he got up pretty early in his career. So we're still waiting on Justin Crawford there, but I don't think he's too far off. But it seems like he's got a little bit more power. I think he's going to be a good ball player.
Yeah.
But I think you're spot on when it comes to Triantos. Agree 100% down the board.
Yeah, I think the interesting case with Crawford is it's not really a case of EVs, like 89.8 average, 110.6 max, 41.8 hard hit percentage. That's not bad at all. It's that you look at the near 60% ground ball rate. That's a major problem. Even for being the first time in AAA at 21 years old. We've only seen 1 home run this year compared to 9 from the season prior. Stolen bases are still there. The approach has looked good. Walk rate is actually up to his credit. But another thing that, and this is also something that has kind of pushed him a little bit down for me, is the chase rate too. We're looking at 34.4%. Maybe you can attribute that to being a little young for AAA, but I think when I'm looking at the chase rate really is what kind of keeps the hit tool not as high as some for me. I think it's a 50 grade hit, 70 speed. Maybe somewhere between 30 and 40 power. The profile as a whole, maybe there's more power to be had there. Launch angles are hard, not impossible to fix, but to me, it's like, it's also more just, the ground ball rate really scares me a lot. So I think it's really, if he can lift the ball a little better, I do think that, I agree. I can see him as more advanced than, his father was coming up, but I think as of now, I just don't, I don't really see the framework of a top 100 profile right now. I think with just his ground ball tendency, this is somebody who's going to struggle to hit, 8 to 10 home runs at the MLB level as it stands.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that analysis. The only thing that I think I would probably differ on is that I think the hit tool is a little bit better. I'd probably go 55 at a bare minimum if I were to give him a grade. I think he's a guy that could, hit 280, 290 through a season. And that's strong enough. If he can hit 10 home runs, he can stay in the lineup. He's got a lot of speed, so that'll help. And maybe it's a little bit of me just dreaming of having another Carl Crawford in the league. Who knows? Okay, so do you want me to get into my just missed? We've got that on the list here.
Yeah, we touched on Salas, Payne, and Triantos there, so we can get into those that are just missed looking on the outside for you.
So, again, I've got my next update coming in about 10 days or so. And so these guys might be on there. So we'll just see. And I know that one of these guys in particular, I think you're pretty high on, and that's Alfredo Duno. So as Merlin Valdez, he's been having a really nice season, showing a lot of power. I'd put him on there. I'm probably going to butcher this last one's name, Jadher Arenamo. I don't know if you know the correct.
Can't confirm that, but I think you're pretty close.
Yeah. Well, that's what I would. So I would add those 3 in there. I don't know if Arenamo will make the top 100. I feel a little bit more confident that those other 2 will. So they're just kind of outside. There's a mix. There's probably about 50 guys that I've got floating between 130 and 80 or so, and they're kind of in and out pretty constantly. That's what I would say.
Yeah, no, I also had Duno for mine too. Is like really, I love the power, just especially from a catcher. I think, really just, I think, it's been a long time since we've seen really a catcher with his raw power and just the lower levels of the minors. Really, like my kind of big concern is, really just the struggles against quality secondaries. I think the swing can get a little long sometimes. It's more of a kind of a power or bust approach. If that makes sense. But really, I think, there's an argument to be made that when you pair his power and then his arm behind the dish and his pop times that at catcher, I think, and maybe, I still have some questions with the hit tool, but I think really with that alone, I think there's a back end top 100 argument. He was someone who just missed for me. I do think that, if we can see him keep up this pace, and keep performing, I think that, come my post-draft update, I do mine a little differently than yours. I do like second week of each month. That way it kind of lines up, I can do 2 kind of pre-draft, then do my kind of post-draft after that, or 3 with counting my preseason. But I definitely think Duno is on that track. So I do also, I don't think Arenamo is one for me that is close, and even in that maybe next 25 to 50, I think I'd favor some other Brewers prospects a little higher: Brock Wilken, Luke Adams, Josh Adamczewski. I think even someone like Bishop Letson, those 4 right there, I think are 4 that would be closer for me than Arenamo. And then Valdez is a really interesting prospect. Hitting for power, hitting for average, the approach is good. He's definitely someone who's skyrocketing. And I think probably someone who was more in that like intrigued. Let's see where it goes. Conversation entering the postseason or entering the preseason. And I think now definitely someone who's probably in that just tier just outside. A lot of interesting names in those 25 to 50 range for me, but I think Valdez is certainly in that group as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with most of those guys that you mentioned, the other Brewers, and he's, want to talk about a system that's awesome. The Brewers just, it seems like everything, there's hits all over.
Yeah.
But I already have like Luke Adams is very low end of my top 100. Brock Wilkins in that same kind of range too. So I've got those guys in there already. So I do have them higher than Ari Nama though, for sure.
Yeah. So I'll get into. I'll do reverse order so I can I'll tack on what my just missed as well. One for me is Didier Fuentes is very close for me. I think really the one thing that kind of keeps him down for me is just not really having that kind of prevalent third pitch. I think really the fastball slider are really good. The fastball really is, in my opinion, a double plus pitch. But I do just tend to be a bit more hesitant with those primarily 2-pitch guys. It's just not really from pitchers. I'm kind of looking for even a third, even average offering, but very advanced for his age. I do think, a 20 in the majors, he's taken kind of that similar AJ Smith-Shawver-like trajectory. I think he is somebody who's going to be a very good arm. And, I think definitely somebody that could be reconsidered come on next update. And we mentioned Duno, and another really interesting one for me that I think is close and probably now that Roker and Leader have graduated, my favorite Rangers pitching prospect, and that's Winston Santos. He missed a lot of time this year with a back injury, but I like I think the velo is really, he's kind of, you could argue he's kind of on the, the more kind of age appropriate age for the AA 23 there now, small sample size, but the command has looked really good, just over 3 walks per 9, nearly 17.5 strikeouts per 9. It's just been 2 starts. Haven't really seen the innings fully built back up, but I think really stuff-wise, the fastball is a plus for me. I think the slider is getting close to there. The changeup is an average offering, and then the command is probably close to plus for me. Not sure I'd put it quite at plus yet, but I think this is somebody who, in my opinion, can be a very dependable number 3 starter at the big league level. So, I think I would take him a little bit over Emiliano Teodo. He's probably my favorite Rangers pitching prospect right now, and I think somebody who could join Sebastian Walcott and the Rangers in the top 100 for me very soon.
Okay, good. I like that. And shout out to Fuentes for his MLB debut. You mentioned him being in the MLB, but just wanted to catch up on that. I hadn't seen how he had performed, so I was looking him up.
I think it was a 5 innings pitch, 4 hits, 4 earned runs, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts. I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. But I think with Fuentes, and I kind of said this is, with a prospect his age on his development path, there's going to be ups and downs. This is somebody that I was fine streaming, giving the matchup, but not somebody I'm really adding in most places. It doesn't really impact my long-term outlook at all, but just in terms of redraft, I think Fuentes isn't really much more than a deep league streamer for me for now. Definitely don't have. Definitely a lot of that is more to do with just his age and just really I want to see more of that kind of change up or another third offering before I kind of get him in there. But the stuff's looked really good, and just I think for with his age and how advanced the stuff is, and control is also very good for his age as well. So I think he's somebody that is definitely going to earn future consideration for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting looking at his trek through the minor leagues this year, because it looks like he's actually performed better as he's stepped up. High A, 5.5 ERA, 5 ERA at Double A. I mean, there's not a lot of innings here. There's not too much to tell from it, but Triple A under 2 ERA all of a sudden. So it's just a very interesting looking trek through the minor leagues.
Yeah, but, no, I think he's also a really good case study in just how important an elite fastball can be for starting pitchers. I think it allows them more to just be on a more aggressive development path. You can develop the secondaries, but when you have kind of really good velo, good, really unique, and just in terms of the the vertical break and the horizontal break, and then also, the bat missing ability that it has. When you have those traits in a fastball, I think it allows more leeway for the secondaries in the off speed or whatever pitches are going to be added to complement his arsenal. I think it gives you a bit more leeway, kind of like how elite defense can bode you well as a prospect kind of coming up in terms of sticking in the lineup. So I think really the fastball is really special for me, and I don't really quite see that. I think there's a pretty wide range here. I think, worst case, we don't really see a prevalent third offering. This is more kind of a back end starter for me, but I think the upside is potentially that of a frontline arm. So I think it's going to be very interesting to follow his development the next year or two. And, obviously the Braves are definitely one of those organizations in that small circle of trust when it comes to getting the most out of their pitching prospects.
Yep. And just turned 20 years old 4 days ago. So that's pretty cool. I'm with you. I think in a deep dynasty league, this is, if he's available, if you can get him, and if it's deep enough, definitely do. Stash him for the future. If we're talking redraft, spot on. I don't think you'd go there unless, you're really desperate.
Yeah. And then I'll go into my followers, and, I'll start off with one. I know we both had Robert Kalaz ranked very highly. He is someone for me, my opinion on, his upside as a potential superstar is unchanged, but I have a lot of questions about the contact ability. I think for me, this is, I think it's, I think Lazaro Montes is an interesting case study for what his potential trajectory can be, because you're looking at a guy in Montes, elite power, shaky contact rates, virtually no speed, likely not gonna hold down a defensive position. It's a little bit different with Kalaz. He's a much better athlete for his size. I think there's a chance he holds down a corner outfield spot. I think the raw power is a 70 for me. I think there's some decent speed for his size too. It's probably someone who could slow down, but really just the hit tool for me is really concerning. And so I think he's somebody who's kind of gone from that. He's gone from that. I think I had him as high as 17 or 18. He's now, I believe, I want to say 62. So really, I think just the hit tool, if we can get the hit tool to even potentially, a 40, 45, we're looking at a much different profile with Robert Kalaz.
Yep, I completely agree with that. I started having some concerns with my placement of him over the off season, and so I dropped him a little bit. And I think I caused a little bit of a stir. People were asking why I would do that, and it was for the reasons that you just highlighted. I was a little concerned with the contact. I was a little concerned with the hit tool, and it looks like that's proving out so far this year.
Yeah,
it's still immense power potential. The Montes comparison to me, I just want to comment on this real quick. I actually think Montes has more athleticism than people would give him credit for. I think he can hold a corner outfield spot. I think he's got a better arm than people think he's got. I don't think he's going to be a burner out there by any means, but I think he's a little more athletic than people think.
Yeah, for me, it's not the arm. I think, the arm is kind of the one thing keeping in, okay, maybe there's a chance he plays in the field, but I don't. He hasn't shown good routes in the outfield. That's a big concern for me. Maybe it's a first base profile, but I think the glove trails a lot behind the arm. So that's kind of one. And I think it's also kind of unique too, is because, when you look at a guy like Montes, who even with, subpar contact rates, I believe it's like a, overall contact rate in the high 60s right now. You're looking at a guy who can still hit you 30 home runs, and I think that's a guy who, if you're getting that from your DH, I don't think that's really that's really something to complain about. Obviously, I think you're looking at maybe a potential, maybe not to the same level, but maybe a Michael Toglia type profile as you move up. The strikeouts with Montes are a bit of a concern for me right now. I do kind of question how the contact and K rates are going to fare as he moves up, but really, I think with his power and, I would disagree that I think Kalaz is still the better defender for now. And I think really, Kalaz is frame wise, I think they're fairly comparable. I want to say Montes is like a little over 6 feet, 245, Kalaz around that around that same size. But I have a lot more confidence right now in Kalaz to hold down a corner outfield spot than I do Montes. And it's really just I have a lot of questions about the routes and really the just the awareness out there. I think it's more of a first base DH type profile defensively.
Well, I think Montes is probably a little bigger than you remember. He's I just pulled him up to confirm, but 6'5".
Oh, damn. Okay.
What do you think but I mean, I'm with you on as far as defense. I just wanted to say that I think Montes is a little bit better than I think people give him credit for out there, but not to say he was better than Kalaz by any means. I am kind of curious. Speaking of 90%, not to keep us on the Montes track, but speaking of 90th percentile outcomes, what do you think the high-end outcome for Montes is?
I'm going to say I think Marcell Ozuna is one who comes to mind. Maybe looking at Atlanta Braves, Marcell Ozuna more so than kind of he's still a good hitter before that, but I think that's one that immediately comes to mind. You're looking at a guy who can maybe get you a low 30s, get you close to 40 home runs, 100 RBIs. Not quite the hitter that he is the slugger, but I think that's still a very viable middle of the order threat. So I think that's one name that immediately comes to mind. JD Martinez is another one, looking more at kind of peak JD Martinez. Still a very good slugger, maybe a 30-ish home run, 100 RBI bat. Still, albeit with high chase rates, going to have his fair share of strikeouts. So those two for me are kind of two that stand out for Montes.
Yeah, I like it. I quite like that Ozuna one. I think it was popular to comp him to Yordan Alvarez, and I think that was overstating his hit tool.
I agree. Yeah.
Quite a bit. I actually, I've kind of been on this train of thinking, no, I think Basayo is the guy that could be a Yordan type of talent, in my opinion.
I agree.
But yeah, it just was kind of curious to get your take who you would think he's like. I like that Ozuna comp quite a bit.
And then getting on my next follower, Carson Williams for me is one who really, I think, if everything, I think it's fascinating because you're looking at if his strikeout rate was 10% lower, you're looking at easily a top 20 to top 15 prospect. But really just the hit tool was super concerning to me. Yeah, it's his first look at AA. The power and speed are still good, but strikeout rate at 35%, hitting 202, 308, 395. To me, just the contact rates scare me a lot. 62.8 contact rate, 76.7 zone. Chase rate is fine, not great, 28.3. 32.5 contact, so he's not making contact on pitches out of the zone a lot. Swing strike percentage nearly 17.5. I try, I still have him. I think I want to say mid 50s if I'm getting that right. Definitely some time that we can see that. Definitely a chance we can see that improve. As he, I think he's going to need some more time in AAA, but first taste at the level. So trying to also account for that, but really, I think this is somebody where I think you could see like. The first couple of years are maybe like an Anthony Volpe, where you're looking at maybe like I think like a 210 to 220 hitter, maybe a 2020 guy, but the hit tool really just concerns me a lot, and it's also that kind of extends to beyond the beyond the strikeouts and on base skills to hitting quality secondaries and pitches low and away. So. Carson Williams is one who's been falling for me. I think you can dream on 90th percentile outcomes for him. I think really one that kind of comes to mind for me is maybe a peak Trey Turner, maybe like a mid 20s home run, good RBIs, good average. I think this is really probably on the higher ends probably of outcomes. I think really that kind of like maybe a Jeremy Pena, Anthony Volpe type is kind of more what I'm looking at for Carson Williams.
Mm-hmm. And we're on the same page about Williams for sure. I probably will have him in about the same range as you. I just cannot believe that there were people putting him in the top 10. I just can't. Even last year, I was like, I don't see it, and it's almost as if the risk associated with that profile was just completely ignored for what he does well. And the risk is just so immense with that profile. I mean, I think a Volpe outcome would be excellent for him. I just don't know if that's even in the realm of likeliness. I mean, I think it's very unlikely, actually. Yeah. I'm concerned with that the hit tool is not going to be strong enough to make it as a major leaguer, and I'll just put it out there. But I think you're right on. If you ignore all the risk and you're only looking at the best case outcome, it's immense. There's power and speed there. I mean, if you really wanted to go to the extreme, you could say, like, okay, he's got the same kind of skill set as like an Alex Rodriguez. Of course, he lacks the hit tool that Alex Rodriguez has, by a factor of 3. So I don't see it happening, but the upside is clearly there. He's a great defender. I think he'll get a shot. The Rays were surprisingly aggressive with him. They have been aggressive with him, and I think right now he's being exposed.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's really fascinating because on one hand, we look at, what is a 90th percentile outcome for Carson Williams? And, we're talking from anywhere from solid, regular MLB shortstops to, a potential, Hall of Fame caliber players, not obviously not accounting for the steroids or anything else on the Rodriguez's case. But I think it's also, for me, I just can't. I can't justify a 30 grade hit tool as, somebody that, and I was definitely a little high on Williams at one point, probably, especially, looking at, kind of the caliber hitter he was last year, not bad, but I don't think a top 10 prospect either. I don't think I ever had him there. I think he's more of a teens to low 20s, but 256, 352, 469, 28.5 K rate, walk rate is fine. But that also came with a 332 BABIP. So, definitely the hit tool concerns me a bit. And I think, we always say don't really count out the Rays when it comes to development, but I think the floor here is maybe a Taylor Walls type. So not even an everyday shortstop, but somebody who still gets into the lineup because of his glove. So I think that maybe for me it's interesting just to have, kind of a comp that kind of works as a floor in the same organization. But, I think it's fascinating because on one hand, you could have, if the hit tool takes some strides, if everything else works out, a potential all-star shortstop. On the other hand, you could have, a bench utility infielder.
Yeah, I mean, I hate being so harsh on him because this was a guy that STS spotlighted super early in his career as a potential, potential really good talent. And I think he is an extremely exceptional talent. I've got my concerns with that hit tool playing at the major league level.
Yeah. And my last faller, and this is also for kind of hit tool concerns, is Owen Caissie. For me, this is just not, this isn't, when I see, the strikeout rate of a guy repeating a level, albeit AAA, rising 3% and the walk rate not really taking some big strides. The power is still good. There's still some decent on-base skills, but really the contact rates really scare me, and they've actually gotten worse in some regards. 70.8 contact rate overall last year, 70.4 this year. Swing strike percentage is slightly improved. Zone contact down 2%. The O contact is slightly up. The chase rate is slightly down. But I think for me, this is kind of more of a power OBP carrying profile for me. And I don't think really the game power is quite at the level of the raw power for Caissie. I think this is maybe a kind of a low 20s home run hitter in the MLB presently. As it's not saying there's not time for him to unlock more of that raw power, but I think for me also just having those hit tool concerns. I think, and not the best runner. It's kind of a corner outfield profile. So I think when kind of looking at that, Caissie is not somebody who is a top 50 guy or close, as some outlets have him, but more somebody who's around that 75 to 85 range for me.
I can get behind that. I think the thing is he's just been so consistent, which is something that appeals to me. He hasn't you'd like to see him growing in capabilities, of course, repeating the level, but he has been so consistent. He's just a performer, he seems to rise above what I expect him to do every year. So
I think to his credit, like he has been kind of a high 20s, low 30s K rate guy at every stop. The walk rate hasn't been what we were seeing kind of at the lower levels, but I still think that, there's more of I don't think the floor is as low as somebody like Carson Williams. I think the hit tool is, and it's kind of more, and he's a little older than Williams, to Williams's defense there, but I think the hit tool is maybe like, I mean, for me, it's kind of it's a 35. I think 40 is also pretty, I think, fair. The on-base skills aided a little bit, but the strikeout rates and the contact rates just don't really wow me at all. So I think that's somebody for me. And, he definitely, I feel like he's kind of been one of those guys where it's like with a lot of prospects, we look at, they've got time to kind of improve on this. He's been somebody who's, you know what you're getting, good raw power, plus game power, some good on base skills. I think, at worst, you're maybe looking at a 340, 350 on base guy potentially with his walk rates. And I mean, I guess passable, not great contact, but yeah, I think he's kind of somebody that, I've, along with a few others that I've kind of overcorrected on. And then I'll run through my risers real quick since we're getting a little short on time, but Eduardo Quintero, who I know you've also been aggressively moving up for me. He is, I want to say 35 right now for me. I was admittedly a little bit wary of putting him this high. Because I don't think like whenever guys repeating low A and the contact rates aren't really there for me, that's something that it's 77.8, so not bad, but not really. I feel like what you want to see from a guy repeating low A. But really, I think looking at the on base skills, looking at the power, looking at the speed, I think the approach is solid. I think, defensively, he's going to be a guy who can hold down a corner outfield spot. Eduardo Quintero is a really exciting prospect for me. And I think probably a bit more from a fantasy lens than a pro lens. I think he's somebody who in that crowded farm system gets kind of overshadowed a bit more than he should. But yeah, I'm really excited about Eduardo Quintero. He's somebody who was probably my biggest riser on my last update. And then Jacob Misiorowski, I mean, it's kind of unbelievable what he's done through 2 career MLB starts, 11 no-hit innings to start his career. I think I saw it's nearly 40 pitches at 100 plus miles per hour. I think it's absurd that his slider and cutter are faster than like some other Brewer starters' fastball. Really, it's just it's elite velo, elite stuff. I think I had a lot of concerns with the command coming into the year. Now it's like, we've gone from a guy who's like almost surefire reliever to, the walks are going to be an issue, but this is somebody who can stick as a starter. Because I think, looking at a lot of his AAA starts, outside of a couple blowups with a ton of walks, the walks are a lot more respectable than they were last season. So he's somebody who's risen for me. He's my number 4 pitching prospect right now, behind Burns, Painter, Chandler. Number 19 overall, I want to say. But yeah, I really don't think that it's an unreasonable argument right now that he might have the best stuff of any MLB starter. I know it's very early, but the stuff is just electric from both a velo and movement standpoint. Lastly, for me, and this is also somebody who's moved up a lot for me, and that's Gage Jump with the Athletics. Stuff has taken a big step forward as a pro, which, coming in, I was like, I don't really know if we have that kind of plus offering with Jump. I thought like kind of the fastball, slider, curveball were around average coming in. So maybe somebody you're looking at a back to mid-end starter. And I did have some command questions, but he's really silenced all of those for me. In AA this year, 1.63 ERA, 9.5 Ks per 9, 2.79 walks per 9 over 7 starts. Jump for me now in a system that kind of lacks high end prospects. He's kind of quickly become one for me, and probably firmly in that tier 2 pitching prospect conversation. Potentially someone who could break into that top tier pitching prospects. But Yeah, I guess one, if I'm being a little nitpicky, is the ground ball rate. It's gotten a little better in AA, so that has kind of quieted my concerns a little bit. But yeah, no, and also the case for 9 hasn't been what it quite was in high A, but I expect we'll see that improve as he settles into AA. This for me is a really exciting prospect, and with the A's poised to be buyers, I think anybody else has got to be on the table right now. But I don't think I would move Gage Jump right now if I were the Oakland A's. If I were the A's, I'm sorry, Oakland is just like confused in my mind when it comes to them.
Yeah, you just got to call them the Athletics now, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. It's going to take me a few years.
Quintero, I love him. He's clearly moving up. I made a play for him in the offseason in my home league, and so I'm just really thrilled to see how he's been developing. Unexpected, almost. I mean, I'm pretty loud on X about how I dropped him out of my top 100 in my May update. And then he's just been on fire since it. He's been hitting like 368 ever since then for the last 2 months. Power, speed, everything on base, like it's all there. So it's very exciting, fun to see. Mizurowski, I do think that there's still going to be some command issues that creep in there, but spot on, elite stuff. Challenge anyone in the major leagues as far as stuff. No doubt about that. Jump, also a really good one to highlight. I wanted to ask you one question, and then I'll be done. Owen Caissie, a comp for him. I am kind of thinking, what do you think about Ian Happ? It's on the same team.
I like it personally. I think there's a bit more upside with Caissie than Happ. I think Happ is maybe that more of where I'd put Caissie if it was like a 55 hit, 50 power. So I think there are some kind of there are some slight differences for me there. I think another one that kind of jumps out for me is Alec Burleson. When you look at the on base skills, you look at maybe a corner outfield bat with good, not elite game power. I think those two kind of put him kind of close for me. So I think. I like the Hap one too, but Alec Burleson is the one that kind of closely comes to my mind.
That's good. I like that. Yeah,
and then
cool.
We're getting a little short on time, so I just want to end it off with who are some top 100 prospects for you right now that are not featured on other outlets and that you would consider yourself higher on than most other people.
That's a tough question. I honestly, I don't really spend a lot of time looking at other publications' top 100, so I don't really know who they do and who they don't have. So sometimes people say, they'll bring up a player to me like, well, what about so-and-so? Or, you're higher or lower on this guy. And it's like, I don't know. I have not actually really spent time looking. Let me just highlight one that I just this is not even close to answering your question, but Luis Pena, I'm having, he's in the argument for number one for me. I think he was 99 last time I looked at MLB Pipeline on their rankings. So, and they have been updating those rankings. It's not like they haven't gotten any updates. So I don't know what's going on there. There's a definite mismatch with what I'm seeing versus what they're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think Baseball America, if I'm remembering correctly, has a 31. Pipeline kind of has been a kind of late adopter. So, I mean, whenever it's MLB Pipeline has this guy at this, why is he lower for you? It's kind of one of those sources that I'm not really if they have somebody high, cool. If they have a lot of guys that, in my opinion, are just kind of get criminally too low, and then you get an update 2 months later, and then it's like, okay, this is looking somewhat better. But I'll go with a couple. One for me is Braden Nett with the Padres. For me, he's my number 2 Padres prospect behind LDV right now. Probably definitely higher than some there, but I think you can make an argument that this is one of the most underrated pitching prospects in the minors right now. I think it's a surefire starter's arsenal for me. The fastball is plus, average slider and curveball. The cutter has also looked really good. The command, if I'm being a little, that's one thing I would like to see improve, although we have kind of seen that down. It was 5.54 last year. It's down to 3.9 walks per nine this year, just over 11.2 Ks per nine, over 55.1 innings pitched, 12 starts in AA. The left on base rate isn't terribly high. The strikeout rate, 28.2, is good. The walk rate is pretty good. The average against 239. So, I think this is someone for me who I think this is a potentially top 75 overall prospect by midseason for me. And I think, that he hasn't been considered on any top, he's not featured on any top 100 prospects is a little surprising to me. Just, I think really with the improved command, especially just with the stuff he has, I think I don't have any questions of, whether it's a starter's mix. But now that we're kind of seeing the command at kind of more at a respectable level, Braden Nett really excites me. And then another one I'll go is Cal Steven with the Blue Jays. He just kind of cracked into my top 100 at number 100 overall. But the fastball, although from a velo perspective, it might not wow people, 92 to 94, I want to say. I think for me, this is, the floor is a back end starter. There's potential for a mid end arm here. The fastball is really unique. It almost has some shades of Chris Bubik to me. It's in that kind of a low 90s fastball, 20 inches of break. I think I think the secondaries are also potentially average as well. So, and then I think really just solid command too. So I don't think this is a flashy player by any means, but when I'm looking at a guy of like 450 to 55 grade pitches and above average command, to me that's definitely a guy who deserves top 100 consideration. And he's been very solid in high A this year. 2.16 ERA, 9.7 Ks per nine, 2.16 walks per nine. Just 5 starts there. Would like to see him get to AA at some point before I'm probably moving him any higher. But swing strike percentage at nearly 15% between the two stops, low A and high A, is really encouraging to me. I don't think this, as of now, with the current stuff, this isn't somebody I really see cracking into that tier 2, tier 3 of pitching prospects for me. But I think for now, when you look at the pitchability, look at just really the really unique fastball, and that I think this is a guy who can give you starters innings, get you deep into games. Maybe I think like a 90th percentile outcome. I don't really want to say Bubik since I brought him up, but maybe if we can see the ground ball rate isn't quite there, but I'm thinking maybe a Freddie Peralta, maybe not really from a velo standpoint, but really kind of unique fastball, some good K upside, maybe a mid to high 3s ERA. So maybe not, I don't think somebody who's going to be like, ever in that flashy can't miss pitching prospect conversation, but I do think somebody who deserves top 100 consideration.
Yeah, I like it. One question for you, and then I guess we can call it if you're ready to wrap, but Leo DeVries, what's your take on his slump? He's in June, he's batting 132.
Interesting. I'm not really too concerned, honestly. I think, at the end of the day, this is still an 18-year-old in high A. If you, I think with a lot of prospects, and, I remember, I think Jordan Lawler is a really good example. This is kind of why I tend to, if you look at him from June, July 2023, I believe he's hitting like one in the 170s or something like that. Is like 21, 22-year-old in AA, something like that. But I'm not all too concerned about DeVries, being a switch hitting shortstop. I like the power, I like the speed, I like the approach. The contact rates have been solid. I think, I try not really to overreact to kind of slumps from prospects. There's obviously adjusting the levels, and then, kind of pair that with, 18 and being at a level where, a lot of guys aren't even out of the complex league yet. No, I don't think really the concern meter is high on LDB right now for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree with you, but it is, the trend that he's on right now is not looking good from his start, unfortunately, but I do think he'll rebound. It's just it's just a shame because we're getting right around to that point where we got to crown somebody. And he was my favorite for a long time. And I don't know, it's bad timing. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I think, when you're looking at it as a potential, 1-1 overall conversation, you want that guy who, in addition to the tools, projectability, upside, also you kind of want that kind of rising stock trajectory from a surface level as well, as we were talking about kind of earlier with the Zana. One thing that, I would kind of look at with DeVries is just looking at just his log from June. The strikeouts aren't really glaring for the most part. He's had a lot of games with 1K, a few with 2. I'm not terribly concerned, especially with the encouraging K rate and walk rate. So, I think this is somebody who, I think really when we see prospects ranked high, as a consensus, and I think a lot of us do this to some extent, we kind of have really high expectations of, this guy's going to really hit the ground running. We're going to see just like a very smooth kind of development to the MLB. And, I think really the reality of that, and this is on the pitching and hitting side, Brandon Sproat is a really good example. This was a can't miss pitching prospect last year. For a lot of people now, this is someone who has seemingly forgotten how to throw strikes and has just been getting rocked in AAA. And, I think right now for me, he's pitched his way out of my top 100. So I think just, another thing, and I know you said this a lot too, is that development is not always linear when it comes to these prospects. We like to dream on what kind of big leaguers they can become, but we also have to recognize that there's going to be a lot of lumps to get there. And, a lot of them honestly are not going to get there. Yep,
absolutely.
Yeah. So and then also, I just to do one more thing, just looking at 276 BABIP as well. I think really on surface, the hit tool may not look great, but I think just for his age, he's going to be fine. I think this is a case of where, you obviously don't want, something like, an Ethan Salas trajectory where they try and rush him up too quickly and stunt his development. But, I think this is somebody is where if we see him, stay the full season in high A, this is somebody who's going to right in the ship.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in to the debut episode of the 90th Percentile Outcomes. We'll have a very big guest coming next week, so we're excited to get that announced, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you.